Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. The unbeaten 21-0 fringe contender Jermaine Franklin is sounding off about his situation, not happy he can't get opportunities. So we'll go through his posts and then on to a few thoughts, because I don't think he's the only one that's sort of in this boat at the moment. And some of it, I think, is the pandemic. Some of it is also promotional issues. But first, Jermaine Franklin, he says, to the boxing fans, I'm tired of the BS in boxing. People say that they got your best interest and they don't. They promise you they got your back and they don't. I'm tired of the lies. I can't support my family on lies. What makes me pissed is the fans are being cheated. I'm undefeated and boxing seems to keep recycling the same MFers who can't fight. Boxing fans want to see the up-and-coming fighters like me. I want to bring the heavyweight belts back to the United States, but they keep recycling the same broke-down fake-ass boxers in the UK. I'm ready to prove I'm the best. Hashtag it's time to make noise. Repost if you're a boxing fan. So I think there are some important issues that Franklin touches on, because there is at the moment, and I've said this on Patreon, I've said this also on the channel in different videos over a length of time, that at the moment there is, from the promoters at large across the world, a move to really try to squeeze every last cent out of their top names before the next generation is coming through. But part of that squeezing that every last cent is also squeezing the every last drop from some of those recycled fighters, the ones that keep getting opportunities. And part of that is because they're known commodities. They're known brand names. They've proven before that they can be in a good fight and sell an event and be part of an event that does well for the promoter. And you can probably think of a number of names, probably chief among them, and maybe this is someone that Jermaine Franklin is getting at, is Derek Chisora. Despite all the losses, because of the way that he fights, he does bring fans, he does bring some money, and he has been involved in some good fights, some big fights. And probably maybe from the outside looking in for, say, the likes of Franklin or even Otto Wallin, who we'll come to in a moment, they're thinking they should be getting opportunities. But I guess the problem is, as well, is the last couple of years, it's been a bit of a weird time with the pandemic. And it's been very apparent that if you're not a prospect at the heavyweight level, and if you're not a big earner, if you sit somewhere in between those two positions, it's been pretty quiet. You've been relatively inactive, and that's been a lot of heavyweights. And especially if you're not with a big promoter, because you're not getting the push. Promoters have been cutting their cloth accordingly and really trying to be a bit careful with what they do. And part of that has been trying to, okay, we know what works. We don't want to take a chance on, some of these guys coming through. Go with some of the names that are known names, because they're known to the casuals. That can help sell more tickets, say in the case of Chisora or others, that sort of thing. And I guess in terms of Franklin's position, he must be very frustrated, because you could take some of what's being sort of said in his post to be a bit of a shot at his promoter. And whether he intends that or not, and he's promoted by Dimitri Salita, there has to be some inkling that this is also directed at him. Remembering in Franklin's case, he's only been out once in the past 3 years. So having a look at his box rec here, 21-0. He's number 54 in the world according to box rec. And then you have his last fight was a couple of months ago against Rodney Moore. Before that, he had a run of fights which had been on bigger broadcasters like Showtime, etc. Pavel Sauer, Jerry Forrest, Rydell Booker. He was starting to gain a bit of a profile. There was meant to be a fight between him and Stephen Shaw a year ago or so, but he had to pull out due to COVID. But even then, if that Shaw fight had gone ahead, that would have been one fight in 2 years. So there's a lot of fighters like Franklin right now who are sitting, waiting and watching. If they're not making money selling a lot of tickets, if they're not a big pay-per-view attraction, if they already weren't a known commodity, a la Derek Chisora, It's hard work. There's a very small number of heavyweights who've been fighting regularly and making money. And I guess for Jermaine Franklin, well, what can happen now? Well, I would think that part of this should be on his promoter, Dimitri Salita. Salita actually has some decent heavyweights in his own stable. If they can't secure other fights, and remembering that Franklin was mentioned for a fight with Dillian Whyte towards the end of 2021. It never happened. Then Otto Wallin was announced as the opponent. Whyte ended up pulling out. Wallin and Franklin are both promoted by Salita. So why can't Salita match some of his heavyweights? And we'll come to that a little bit more in a moment. But I'll touch on Otto Wallin because he's in a similar boat. 2019, he has that fight with Tyson Fury, and he has some success. But at the end of the day, he was beaten, and since then they haven't been able to capitalize on that. He's still calling for the Tyson Fury rematch, saying, "The one who deserves a rematch is me. A picture says more than 1,000 words. I like Chisora, but Fury has already beat and stopped him in the past. Come on now." And actually, Fury's beaten him twice. Fury's actually made a couple of comments regarding Derek Chisora and that he would like to, at some point, fight him for a third fight. So this is not new either. So this has come up again, but he's previously said this before. Ultimately, Tyson Fury does have some sway over who he fights. But I think the thing is there any demand for a Chisora-Fury fight, given he's lost the first two? I don't think so. I'm not sure it's realistic. But also, at the same time, what has Otto Wallin done since he lost to Tyson Fury? Well, mostly it's been calling out Tyson Fury for another fight. He's been relatively inactive, and in a couple of fights didn't look that good, but also he had a decent performance against Dominic Breazeale, but at the end of the day, he's been very inactive. And part of that is down to his promoter as well, Dimitri Salita. So why can't Salita, who not only has Franklin, he has Otto Wallin, he co-promotes Jarrell Miller, he also promotes Abdi Dovtaev and Gunnar Kolbeinn Christensen. Why can't they have some sort of internal box off? Because the thing is right now, sitting, waiting and watching and, trying to wait for a promoter to throw out another promoter with a TV deal to throw a bone to Salita's fighters, they could be building their names and their profiles by fighting each other. I mean, to me, that would seem like Wallin and Franklin, that's not a bad fight at all. What about Otto Wallin and Jarrell Miller? Abdi Dovtaev versus Gunnar Kolbeinn Christensen. I know some people will say, well, why would he want to burn off his own different fighters against each other? But what choice does he have? These guys are rotting on the vine. Nothing's happening. And the thing is, I don't think things will change for the next year or two as we sort of slowly come out of that sort of pandemic malaise. And I know some people will say, oh, the pandemic's been and gone, but there's still an after effect for heavyweights. You think about a lot of your other favorite heavyweights. At the moment, they're fighting, once a year, maybe twice a year max. But a lot of these middling heavyweights that are somewhere between maybe 20 and 50th in the world, they're not even fighting at all. Some of them can't get fights to save themselves. It's a different story maybe for some older, sort of notable guys who've had former title challenges for the likes of Carlos Takam and also Marius Vuk, because they're seen as stepping stones. But guys that have genuine ambition to climb to the top, who are still in their prime trying to work their way up, they are just rotting on the vine. You can think of a whole bunch of others apart from Salita's heavyweights. Aslanbek Makhmudov. You've got Zan Kosabutsky. The list goes on and on. Stephen Shaw just can't seem to get a meaningful fight to save himself. I still want to see Shaw versus Franklin. I thought that was a really well-matched fight. I was favouring Shaw in that fight, but it would have been competitive. Two unbeaten guys. I hope they can maybe revisit that. But part of the blame as well, if you're in a stable that's with a sort of mid-tier promoter like Salita, he's got to make things happen. And perhaps he's got to make things happen amongst his own heavyweights. But I can understand the frustration from Franklin, because I'm seeing it from a lot of different heavyweights across the spectrum. Not just American heavyweights, all over the shop. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.